It's Thursday, counting down as usual to the
Absolutely.
weekend. Activities happening here and there. Yep. And those are some of the issues we'll be looking at. ECOWAS talking about Emefiele back in court today.
Yet again.
And we'll be looking at so many issues as the program gets along. But let's quickly delve into one of the issues we will be talking about this morning. And that's the battle for the lawful custody of the suspended governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria. That's Godwin Emefiele, who is expected to resume, today at the Federal High Court in Lagos, following two fresh applications by both the top banker and the federal government. The first application filed by the government on August the 3rd is seeking leave to appeal against the order of vacation. Justice Nicholas Oweibo, which granted Mr Emefiele bail. The second, filed by the defendant on August the 8th, is asking the court to stop the federal government from further prosecuting him on the charge of illegal possession of a firearm and ammunition or any other charge. Recall that vacation judge, Justice Oweibo, had on July the 25th admitted Mr Emefiele to a 20 million naira bail on a two-count charge of illegal possession of firearms and ammunition, and ordered his remand at the Correctional Center pending the fulfillment of his bail conditions. But the DSS rearrested the embattled bank chief after fighting of correctional officers on the court premises. That's the video we just saw on our screen that made headlines, you know, when the battle on who should take custody of the former governor of the CBN happened. But then he's appearing in court again today. And the DSS has insisted that they uphold the law, and that for whatever reasons, if you look at their records, they are not running against, the law, but for them, they insist that they are ardent respecters of the law and that whatever they are doing is in accordance with the law. But this matter will be before the court today again, where the DSS is joining issues with the former governor of the CBN, and the court will be hearing the fresh application today. Kemi.
It also promises to be an interesting day, especially since both sides are billed to be adequately represented by top counsel for the federal government through the director representing the federal government. Of course, we don't have an attorney general of the federation yet appointed, but the federal government side, looking at the last hearing, is going to be, well represented through its some of its counsel. And of course, the defense, which is led by a senior advocate of Nigeria and former NBA president Joseph Daudu, are also billed to be in attendance today. And interesting angles from both sides. Federal government is saying it wants to stay execution of the matter, stay execution of the order the judge had earlier given. And interestingly, the DSS wants to stay action, but then the defendant is already in the DSS custody. So how the DSS is going to play around the scenario, because, on the face of it, the DSS is disobeying an existing court order. And so for the DSS to still insist it is obeying the rule of law as we have seen, we wait to see what the court's verdict will be, because the court would naturally want to protect itself, from an affront. And that is what people have, spoken about, those outraged by the development that we witnessed the other day. You can just imagine a court saying, hand the defendant over to the correctional service, and this agency was also on grounds to receive the defendant, that's Mr. Emefiele, from the DSS custody, but the DSS refused to let go of him, basically, even though he was seeking protection within the court, where it was an issue of, as soon as it comes out, who receives him. It should be the corrections, as the court had ordered, that take him out of the facility of the DSS. But then what we saw was very interesting, and instead of us to have even gone home that day, we had to wait, because naturally, if it was the police will have to step aside and let the corrections take over. But as we see now, the DSS refused to leave the court premises, and it became a very rowdy and messy scene as we see. That's a senior officer that is being assaulted, so to speak. This is not someone you will see on a regular day. This must be a high-ranking officer looking at the badge.
He is obviously
right
with the badge.
with the badge on him, and all of that. But it was a very fearful scenario. We don't know whether Mr. Emefiele will come to court today. It doesn't appear he will come, but it remains to be seen what will pan up. But it will no doubt be interesting, because from what we know, it's going to be his applications. The hearing was originally adjourned to November the 14th for him to come back to the court. But because we believe this is urgent, on both sides, the defense wants to squash the charges against him. That also is interesting, because it remains to be seen whether they would allow, whether the court would grant that kind of application for the charges to be quashed without him going through the merits and bringing in witnesses on both sides. So it remains to be seen.
To prove beyond reasonable doubt.
So it's interesting. It promises to be an interesting hearing against the court.
Well, he said his fresh application is seeking to preserve and protect the efficacy, majesty, and integrity of the court, as well as the rule of law of our democracy. Like you have rightly pointed out, that is left to be seen how things will pan out today. Obviously, this case is taking an interesting dimension, stemming from what happened like we're showing now on our screens. And then we recall that the president engaged the services of a private investigator to look into the activities of the CBN after, Godwin Emefiele was taken out to be to court. And that is also a matter on the ground as we speak. There are those who are saying that, okay, if you're trying to look into the matters of how the CBN ran its operations while the Godwin Emefiele was at the helm of affairs, perhaps he should have engaged the services of an auditor as against a private investigator.
Well, it depends on where we stand. Our standpoint now. The matter obviously needs deep investigations, deep probe, and from what we have seen so far, it's a continuous exercise, and it appears that the government is is insistent on unearthing all the mysteries that that the CBN was surrounded in under the reign of the tenure of the erstwhile CBN governor. Of course, he was about 2 years shy of the end of his tenure, but going by the strength of his alleged infractions, the federal government decided to have him removed and bring in a successor to hold sway in acting capacity. So there are a lot, and of course this year is not over, but Nigerians are very mindful of the controversial Naira redesign policy and the effect on the larger part of Nigerians. Even politicians were not left out, and despite the good intentions of that policy, there were so many things that Nigerians found very uncomfortable with, the timing and all that. That alone, or that stands out. If you look at the legacy of Mr. Emefiele, no one can not mention that. That has, of course, and the free fall of the Naira too, that has also, put him into the spotlight. And now with the criminal dimensions, with the dimensions, according to the DSS, that it even goes beyond, banking infractions. It now talks about issues that pertain to
financing terrorism,
national security, absolutely,
and laundering monies, aside other crimes, and then the illegal possession of firearms, as it has been said, as cases put before him. The matter is an interesting one. Of course, when his name is mentioned, I believe a lot of persons will not remember anything aside the redesign of the Naira and its impact on the economy and Nigerians, every Nigerian as it stands at the time. And you recall that the case was put before the court. There were back and forth as regards who made this, who said this policy should run, the court is saying this at this point, and he is insisting that it's not going to stop at this point. And then the case is still to run till the end of this year.
Absolutely.
But it's left to be seen how the government intends to handle this matter of Godwin Emefiele. At the end of the day, there are some who are saying that it's a case of personal vendetta. But then if the DSS says there is a matter, Nigerians believe that they would have done their investigation, their due diligence to know if truly he was involved or not.
Well, it does remain to be seen, but of course DSS indeed is on the spotlight, and Nigerians haven't recovered from it, from that scandal, that the rearrest of Mr. Emefiele within the court premises. Nigerians are still talking about it, and today we'll just more or less remind Nigerians on how much needs to be done, especially in relationships between agencies, sister agencies.
Yeah.
It remains to be seen. People have called for investigation. People have called for, the DSS has said that both officers of both agencies were overzealous, and that they would be investigated. And we haven't heard anything from that, insisting, like you said, that they did not disobey the court order. But we'll see how far it goes regarding whether the facts does speak for itself, because we're all in court. The court was on record, and we will see how it goes. If you maintain that you were not in disobedience, of course, it's not your word alone. The court will have to make a verdict on that. Whether
and I believe that Nigerians are waiting to see if truly the DSS was actually looking to uphold the court, the rule of law, as it has been said, or perhaps it was in disobedience of the orders of the court. And then I'm wondering if the investigations have begun with regards to that matter, because it will be good for Nigerians to understand the direction, so that an incident like that does not occur again, because it didn't put us in a good light. It didn't paint us in a good light at all, and it also speaks to the level of relationship between sister agencies. If you are doing your job, I believe that it can be done in such a way where we do not have fisticuff, and that you don't have to fight about it. You can engage being senior officers. Even if you're not a senior officer, there should be some level at which you can communicate with a sister agency for them to understand what has to be done at that point. And if you look further, during that matter, there was a journalist that was even caught in the middle of this whole matter, who was assaulted in the process of trying to carry out his duty at the end of the day. So I believe it will bring some form of perhaps closure for that journalist, or for journalists on the whole, who are trying to understand how things work in the system with regards to sister agencies being on the ground, and then how journalists should manage themselves around areas like this.
It will also be another opportunity for the judiciary to protect its image, because a big worry for observers has been the obedience or otherwise of decisions reached by the court. You just did a recall now of events surrounding the court's intervention on the Naira redesign swap, and we know how the Supreme Court, because the matter was instituted by governors of the state governors against the federal government, which was, of course, being led by the former President Buhari, and the Supreme Court of the land gave verdict after verdict, ordering the government to stay action, while Mr. Emefiele was heading the Central Bank of Nigeria, and there was nothing. There was no obedience to that effect until the president had to now release a statement, saying that there was nothing, that he wasn't, objecting to the obedience of the court order, and that kind of now finally brought sanity. But so, how the court will save its protect its image, protect its integrity, which is what the defense is riding on at this point. Now, how the court will stand up, against these challenges to its integrity, people would also, wait and see, because it makes nonsense of the rule of law, and of course, investors will be watching to know. So if a court gives a verdict on a matter, it appears, or would it appear, that is not the end of it? Somebody under the cloak of government can now choose to obey or disobey. So it says a lot. It has diverse implications, and we'll see how the court stands up for itself today.
Absolutely. We'll leave the conversation here now.